How's it going, everyone? It's Avi from Marshall 1000. Today is February 20th, 2021, and today we're going to talk about the spring forecast for this year. But before I begin, make sure to subscribe if you want to see more weather-related content. Make sure to like if you like this video. Make sure to turn on post notifications if you want to see even more weather-related content. So let's begin by taking a look at the Arctic Oscillation, which is a huge factor in determining what type of winter we'll see or what type of short-term weather conditions we'll see over the next couple weeks to the next couple months. And you see that for the past couple months, we've been mainly in a negative Arctic oscillation pretty much for 2 months straight, between December 31st to all the way till nearly the middle of February. It's not until I'd say February 15th where we finally got out of the negative Arctic oscillation, and now we've reached a positive Arctic oscillation. And if you don't know what an Arctic oscillation means, long story short, is that when the Arctic oscillation is negative, the United States is a lot more prone to jet stream dips, while if it were positive, then that would mean the jet stream is less likely to dip into the United States, which would bring the cold air further southward and create a lot more snowstorms or potent troughs in general, since there's less instability during a positive Arctic oscillation when there's less jet stream dips moving further south. When we're in a negative Arctic oscillation, that typically means we're more likely to get colder temperatures, far more potent troughs, snowstorms, and low pressure systems, which could impact a lot of us when it comes to precipitation and severe weather and snowfall. However, in the spring's case, the Arctic oscillation is important because if it's negative, then that would mean that we're more likely to see more severe weather thanks to the increased amount of jet stream dips, and we're also more likely to see more colder weather conditions throughout the United States when we're in the negative Arctic oscillation. However, if we're as you can see right here, we're now in a positive Arctic oscillation, and most of the computer models are expecting this to continue and then maybe drop down again in March. But at this point, based off of the current pattern we've been seeing based off of the patterns we've been seeing of Arctic oscillations, usually when we reach a certain threshold in the Arctic oscillation index, let's say either positive or negative, it usually stays like that for a couple of months. It doesn't really go back and forth a lot every week. As you see, the last negative Arctic oscillation pattern is a perfect example because we see the index be lower than normal for pretty much 2 consecutive months, which meant that for 2 consecutive months, the United States was receiving colder than average temperatures and also a lot more snowstorms as well. And since we're in a positive Arctic oscillation now, and it seems likely that we're going to stay in it for maybe a couple months. It could be 1 month, or maybe that these computer models could be right and maybe we drop down to it. But based off of the typical pattern and based off of my experience of looking at the Arctic oscillation index, it's unlikely that we're going to see this immediately drop down to negative Arctic oscillation. So I think more likely we're going to be in a positive Arctic oscillation for the short-term future. I'm talking about maybe 1 month to 2 months we're going to be in the Arctic oscillation, or even those several critical weeks we're going to be in a positive Arctic oscillation. I think I said negative before. I meant to say positive. So what that means is that since we're likely going to be in a positive Arctic oscillation, maybe for the first month of spring to maybe approaching the second month, then that means we're more likely to see warmer than average weather conditions throughout the United States for late March into April, since during a positive Arctic oscillation, the westerly winds are a lot stronger. There's the low pressure that's currently in the Atlantic and the high pressure that's located in the southern Atlantic, pretty much a Bermuda high, are stronger than usual right now, which is increasing the westerly winds to divert that cold Arctic air from Canada more in the easterly to a westerly to easterly direction rather than from a northerly to southerly direction, which is common during negative Arctic oscillation when the westerly winds are weak. But since we're going to be in a positive Arctic oscillation, that does increase the chance that we're going to see warmer than average weather conditions for at least early spring. And then we might drop down back to a negative Arctic oscillation, which could cool things down again. However, I think for the first few months of spring, you should expect warmer than average temperatures, with the Arctic oscillation being positive. And what this also means, when the Arctic oscillation is positive, is that we're less likely to see severe weather threats, because obviously the main driving force of these severe thunderstorms is strong instability, which increases that convection considerably and rapidly. When there's strong instability, that forces a lot of that warm air rapidly up, and that creates the thunderstorms. However, during an Arctic oscillation, positive Arctic oscillation, there's going to be less jet stream dips, which means that less cold air is going to move south to interact with that warmer Gulf of Mexico air, and as a result, it could increase the severity of thunderstorms or completely decrease the amount of severe thunderstorms. However, I want to put a disclaimer that a positive Arctic oscillation does not at all mean that you're going to see a fewer than typical severe weather events in the Midwest, because there's still like a lot of factors that could completely outweigh the effect that positive Arctic oscillation has on the spring forecast. So while the Arctic oscillation does support warmer temperatures and less severe weather in general, there are other factors I'm gonna show you right now that completely outweigh the fact that there's going to be a positive Arctic oscillation in early spring. And also, I want to point out that the positive Arctic oscillation is likely going to is mainly going to be here only for the early spring, and then later spring we could get back to negative, which would enhance the chance of a cooler than average late spring, or maybe increase the chances of severe thunderstorms. So, however, let's take a look at the CFS computer model, and this is a computer model used to forecast climate over the next 3 months, or pretty much the long-term future relative to our daily forecast. And you see that for the most part, this temperature anomaly is the average of 3 months, pretty much extending from March, April, and May, which is pretty much the heart of spring. It is missing a little bit of June, but for the most part, this is what you should expect for most of spring based off the computer model. And the computer models are very accurate because they pretty much synthesize historical data, and they use a current patterns that we're seeing right now to determine what will happen in the future. And it looks back at historical data, compares it to patterns similar to this current one we're experiencing, and it comes to the conclusion that for the most part, we're going to see much warmer than average temperatures for most of the United States, especially in the Northeast, where the highest temperature anomaly is right around southern Canada, where they're well above average in terms of temperature for the most part. And even throughout the southeast, they're above average in temperature, and even extending to Florida, the Midwest. Most of the United States is forecasted to experience above average temperatures for this spring. And the only outlier, obviously, is the Northwest Pacific, where they're expected to receive, for the most part, cooler than average temperatures over the next 3 months. So this definitely gives a good idea of what type of temperatures you guys should expect throughout the United States, because it is based off of historical data, events similar to this in the past. And for the most part, this computer model is predicting a warmer than average winter for pretty much over 75% of the United States. So if you're into summer, if you want to lay outside, if you enjoy the outdoors like me, then this is definitely great news because we're forecasted for the most part in the United States to have temperatures well above average. The only outlier is the Northwest Pacific, where it's going to be expected to be cooler and more moist than average for that time of year in the spring. So now let's take a look at its forecasted precipitation. And this is also interesting because while in a lot of areas it might be warmer than average, we also have to keep in mind that that might be completely useless if it rains a lot of the time. And you see for a lot of the Midwest, pretty much the Ohio River Valley and Mississippi River Valley, you're expected to get more precipitation than usual. And this isn't a surprise to me, mainly because for the most part, the chances of an La Nina are still highly likely to extend all throughout the next 3 months through March, April, and May. And what's typical for a La Nina pattern is that we see more moist conditions than usual right around the Ohio River Valley and extending throughout the Mississippi River Valley as well. So this isn't really a surprise to me because the La Nina typically does this. However, it's definitely something to keep in mind because not only that it's going to be more moist than usual, which would mean more rain days for you guys right around the Midwest, it also enhances a chance of potential severe weather because when the Midwest is under more moist conditions, that pretty much tells you that there's more unstable air in this region, there's more rising air in this region, and as a result, there's more troughs going to move through this region. And since there's so much precipitation within a 3 months period, the chances of a lot of that rain being severe thunderstorms is very high. So it's likely that as a result of the increased precipitation, humidity, and rising air in this region, you're bound to experience more thunderstorms than typical for this spring. And outside of this very moist weather pattern expected throughout the Ohio River Valley, the CFS model is also predicting a much drier spring than usual throughout the southeast, especially right around Florida, where they're expecting where the forecasted precipitation is expected to be much lower than typical for the spring. So in Florida, you definitely would want to celebrate if you enjoy the sunshine, as it's expected to be much drier than usual. And this extends throughout the West. However, to a lesser extent, we don't see the very high confidence, which is represented by the darker contours, which represent that they're more certain that there's going to be more drier air, but for the most part throughout the West Coast, it's expected to be drier than typical. And obviously the outlier again is the Northwest Pacific, where it's expected to be more moist than usual. And it's expected because when it's cooler than usual in the Northwest Pacific, that typically means that there's a lot more precipitation because obviously those troughs and the clouds block a lot of that shortwave radiation to hit on the Northwest Pacific, which would rise up the temperature. So it's actually going to be a moist and cool winter for you guys based off of what the CFS model is forecasting. But not only we have to keep in mind of the CFS model, we also have to take a look at the 3.4 Nino index, which gives a good representation of what El Nino pattern we're going to see headed into this spring. Because if we take a look at the temperature anomaly in the Nino 3.4 region, which is a region most used by meteorologists and scientists to determine whether or not we're going to see an El Nino, a La Nina, or neutral season. And you see for the past several months, pretty much starting from, I'd say, June 2020, extending all the way to January, we've been in a La Nina phase where temperatures are much lower than average. And it was the primary reason why the hurricane season was the most active of all time in the Atlantic this past season, and you see that it's still continuing, and even extending to January 2021. Literally there was no temperature difference in terms of the sea surface temperature and between December 2020 and January 2021. And not only that, it's not only that they're only slightly in the La Nina phase at this point, they're so deep in it with sea surface temperature is 1.05 degrees Celsius below average, and the threshold for a La Nina phase is right around negative 0.5 degrees Celsius. But as of right now, at least in January, the sea surface temperature anomaly was minus 1.05 degrees below average. So we're still deeply in the La Nina phase, and you might be thinking that based off of the past several months where we've been in a La Nina phase, you might be thinking that it's likely that it can't hold this La Nina phase for much longer, because since it's been a La Nina so long, and weather is constantly changing, there's only so much time before we see a change in the weather factor. And you might be right in that sort of stance, because weather changes quickly. It's unlikely that a certain pattern maintains for a long period of time. However, based off of the forecast from the National Weather Service, we see that that we're still forecasted to stay in the La Nina phase and maybe transition to a neutral phase later. But even extending further and further to the summer, the La Nina phase is expected to come back with only a very, very slight, pretty much a non-existent chance of an El Nino during the spring months. And based off of the chances that the CPC is giving, we see that the chances of a La Nina are greater than 60% throughout March and May 2021, which gives it a more likely chance that there's going to be a La Nina phase still extending throughout the months of March, April, and May, and probably even towards June, where the La Nina phase is expected to come back. There could be that chance. There's definitely still that chance it does transition into a neutral phase though. However, the neutral phase and La Nina phase aren't that much different either to really make any major changes in terms of the weather you should forecast in the United States. It's not until you switch from a La Nina to El Nino phase where you definitely see a lot more changes in the weather pattern in the United States. So for the most part, you should expect right around La Nina conditions, maybe neutral conditions, but more likely than not, a La Nina will extend throughout this spring. And what this means, I'll show you right now, is that we typically see more moist conditions throughout the Northwest Pacific, and along with the moist conditions comes cooler than average conditions as a result of the increased amount of clouds throughout the Northwest Pacific, blocking a lot of that shortwave radiation from heating up the Northwest Pacific. And we typically see drier and warmer conditions throughout the Southeast during a La Nina phase, and we see more moist conditions throughout the Ohio River Valley and a lot of the Midwest. And the CPC model, if you see that, agrees with this the most, which gives us confidence that there's going to be a La Nina phase based off of what we've been seeing. So pretty much I'd expect right around La Nina conditions for the most part, since it's most likely to happen, and the CFS model agrees with it for the most part. And while I already went over all of this, it's going to be more moist and cool in the Northwest Pacific. It's going to be more moist throughout the Midwest and likely a lot warmer throughout most of the United States. Well, I haven't gone over yet, which could definitely be a concern if you're in the Midwest, is the frequency of tornado and hailstorms occurring during a La Nina or El Nino phase. And during the El Nino phase, you see that tornadoes and hailstorms are a lot less frequent in the Midwest, but compare that to a La Nina, where during the La Nina phase, they're far more frequent to receive hailstorms thanks to the increased jet stream dip associated with a La Nina phase, and you're also more likely to experience tornadoes, especially right around Arkansas, Oklahoma, and throughout Missouri and Kansas as well. So I'd say for the most part, we're gonna see more above average severe weather conditions throughout the Midwest, because not only is it going to be more moist, which increases the chance of rising air, and since there's more rising air and convection in this region, you're bound to get at least a couple that will be severe thunderstorms. But during the La Nina, you're also more likely to get more jet stream dips, which will induce a lot of those hailstorms and tornadoes throughout the Midwest. So I'd expect a more above average severe weather threat for a lot of the Midwest, and it's definitely something you guys want to stay alert of and even prepare beforehand, just in case a tornado or a hailstorm comes through your area. So I think for the most part, we're going to see above average severe weather conditions throughout the United States, and this even extends to the Northeast and the East Coast, where you're more likely to see tornadoes and hailstorms during a La Nina phase rather than an El Nino. So for the most part, I'd expect more above average tornado and higher frequency of tornadoes, hailstorms, and severe thunderstorms overall. So in terms of my forecast, so this is my forecast regarding the spring 2020. This extends from March, April to May, and you see that I'm expecting very dry and mild conditions throughout a lot of the East Coast, because we're going to see that jet stream dip mainly affect the Midwest when it comes to moisture. And I think for the most part, a lot of the East Coast is going to miss out on a lot of that moisture, especially since there's a positive Arctic oscillation. So the jet stream dip won't be as pronounced to really reach the Northeast. So I do expect more dry and mild conditions throughout the United States, especially the southern United States and the Northeast. And in the Northeast especially, expect well above average temperatures. While I expect it to be drier than usual, I expect the temperatures to be well above average for this spring, and you could get some record-breaking events when it comes to temperature in the Northeast, because we're more likely to see a positive Arctic oscillation, which means less jet stream dips overall. And based off of what the CFS model is saying, we're more likely to see a very warm winter in the Northeast. And then you see for a lot of the Midwest, I'm expecting an above average severe weather threat thanks to the La Nina that's expected to stay with us throughout the spring and bring more unstable air in this region. And I also expect more moist and mild conditions as a result of a La Nina, which typically brings more moist conditions throughout the Midwest in general. And then I expect it to be cool and moist throughout the Northwest Pacific, because during a La Nina, the jet stream typically just moves through this area and brings a lot more moisture to the Northwest Pacific. So this definitely it definitely could change, like my last spring forecast, which I think I did about a month ago. I did definitely change my forecast because I brought a little bit more moist conditions to the East Coast, but now I've moved that further westward, as it seems more likely it's going to be drier across the East Coast. And for tornadoes, I expect to be above average severe weather year for a lot of the Midwest. I don't expect it to be record breaking. I wouldn't go that far because like I said in my last video, I thought it had the chance to be just a crazy severe weather threat year. But for this one, I'm just expecting an above average severe weather threat year, but I don't expect it to be record breaking necessarily, because there's going to be a positive Arctic oscillation. So I don't think there's going to be as much jet stream dips. However, I could definitely be proven wrong, as this forecast is preliminary. It's definitely subject to change based off of the short-term weather conditions we're predicted to see. So definitely keep this in mind and stay prepared for potentially dangerous severe weather year for a lot of the Midwest. But anyways, guys, I thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe if you want to see more weather-related content. Make sure to like if you like this video. Make sure to turn on post notifications if you want to see even more weather-related content. And I hope you guys have a good day.